Is this working? Whoa, TJ, hey. Coronza, hey, how's it going? Thanks for joining. Thanks for showing up. Currently waiting for some more people to come in, and I'm going to post a little link on Twitter to encouraging people to come over to Patreon. Hopefully, just give me 1 second. You guys can hear me, right? Just gonna make sure that. Okay, cool. West Coast. Hey, hello everyone. Laura, TJ, Carranza, Roy, Stanza. So my kids are currently sleeping. I probably will have about 1 hour to stream, and it seems like everyone can hear me right now. So I'd like to just encourage people to ask any questions they might have with regards to studying Japanese, living in Japan, anything like that. But also, this is kind of meant to be really an ask me anything. So anything outside of those particular topics as well, I'd be happy to answer questions. So yes, I did go to the University of Washington. So I majored in Japanese linguistics, I think was the degree. Yeah, was there for the full 4 years, and I spent one of those years at Keio University in Tokyo, so studying abroad. Sorry, I'm just drinking my matcha. Did you use Anki when you were studying? Yes and no. So I've never used Anki for anything except for studying for the JLPT N1. So I didn't try and get the JLPT N1 until a very certain specific point during my studies. So as you guys know, I spent basically the first 3 or 4 years of my Japanese studying just concentrating on phonetics. But then after I moved to Japan and I started working on the JET program, about halfway through the 3 years I was on the JET program, I decided I was going to try and get N1 because I think it's a good resume builder, so to speak. And so from the point that I decided that I was going to get N1 to the actual, try and get N1 to the actual test, basically every single weekend that I had, I would get up in the morning at 8 o'clock on Saturday and Sunday, go to the local Starbucks in Oita-ken, and then I would just use like Anki apps specifically for the JLPT, so it's like JLPT1 vocabulary, and I would just do that for like 4 or 5 hours. So I'd have like a big coffee in the morning, and then I would just spend the whole morning. Yes, they do have Starbucks in Oita. I think there's 4 or 5. Yeah. And I would just spend the whole morning there going over Anki basically until my brain would stop working. And then I would spend the rest of the day back at my place watching movies, relaxing, trying to, recover from the caffeine crash. But I've never used Anki for anything besides, Laura, good question. Anything besides vocabulary specifically. So Laura asks, do you plan on living in Japan for the rest of your life? Will you teach your kids English or bring them to America ever? So I do plan on living in Japan for the rest of my life, provided there are no major changes in terms of like, politics and stuff like that, as long as there's no like wars or anything. Yeah, similar to that, I do plan on staying in Japan, and that's just because I think specifically, well, really for growing old, Japan is a great place to be. I mean, the healthcare system is amazing. It's super cheap. And the town that I live in right now, Beppu, is, I mean, it's just a great city. It's not too fast paced, but it's just large enough for all your needs. And I really don't like really hectic life, and I just really enjoy my life right now in Beppu, and I've always enjoyed living in Japan. And I'm probably going to make a video about this in the relatively near future, but I think a lot of people that want to go and live in Japan or are already living in Japan, I think to a large degree they can't explain why they're interested in Japan, why they like Japan. It's just, for them, it glows, so to speak. And I've always been that way too. And I think I've always justified that glowing effect that Japan has on me through different things, whether it's like, okay, well, I love Japanese music, or, well, I love, Japanese convenience, or I love Japanese women, or I love, Japanese, the transportation system, or whatever it might be. But I think the more time that you spend in Japan, all of those things continue, or they kind of get normalized for you. So you just kind of have to keep on perpetually creating this reason that you're in Japan, because you don't actually know why you love Japan so much. And I think, I mean, you can articulate a lot of those reasons specifically, but I think for a lot of people, myself included, there's just something about Japan that you can't explain it. It's non-explainable. And that's why it's, for so many people that are interested in Japan, it's such a big deal. So I didn't articulate that very well, but I do intend on making a video about that. So hopefully that answered your question. And you said, will you teach your kids English or bring them to America ever? So I speak mostly to them in English right now. My wife speaks mostly in Japanese, and my parents live in the States. So we'll probably go back every like summer or something like that for the foreseeable future. So they'll probably come up bilingual. So Andy says, speaking of major events happening, how was Oita during and after the Kumamoto earthquake? Did that make you reconsider staying in Kyushu? And did that affect anything when buying your mansion? No, it didn't make me reconsider at all. I don't know how to say this without coming across as a jerk, but I think that for a lot of earthquakes that aren't particularly large, I mean, like particularly devastating, like the earthquake on March 11th, I think, what was it, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago now, 10 years ago? Was it 10 years ago already? Not 10 years ago, but anyways, something like that, obviously. Hey, Alvin, good to have you here. Something like that, obviously, it's devastating, and thousands and thousands of people died. But I think for a lot of like smaller earthquakes, in Kumamoto, that was a big earthquake, and like there was multiple fatalities, and a lot of people had their homes crushed and stuff like that. And we shook a lot here in Beppu, but I mean, there was no damage whatsoever to my place. No one got injured or anything like that. And people, I don't know, it's like people want to use that as an excuse to kind of get rowdy, like, oh my God, there was an earthquake, let's Snapchat about it and stuff like that. Where I think the overwhelming majority of earthquakes in Japan, again, excluding those actually devastating ones, they're not a big deal at all, and you just learn to live with them. So it's never really been an issue to me. And the only reason that I ever brought it up with regards to buying the condo is because it's, well, we're going to be here for like 35 years. So in that case, you know, it's not just the fact that it's new, but it's like, well, the structural integrity hold over time as well, you know, multiple decades. So earthquakes have never dissuaded me from living in Japan, nor tsunami or any natural disasters like that. Like the typhoons, you know, hurricanes basically, but in the Pacific Ocean, those are pretty bad each year, but it's never been, oh, thanks, Shifter, really appreciate it. It's never been an issue for me. So I hope that answered your question. So let's see. Karonza, in regards to once you were living in Kyushu, did you ever decide to learn any of the local dialect or pitch accent patterns? That's a great question. So because I spent a good amount of time studying phonetics specifically before I even came to Japan, I was kind of hyper aware of like differences in pitch accent and stuff like that. Once I came to Oita and, you know, oh, this sounds like slightly different, that kind of thing, I noticed it pretty quickly. And I purposely tried not to mimic it because I didn't want my Japanese to sound fragmented. So I think I talk about this in episode 2 of Japanese phonetics, but a lot of people think, they make the excuse, they say, you don't need to study Japanese pitch accent because the pitch of Japanese is different all over Japan. But that argument doesn't really make sense to me because Japanese people don't arbitrarily switch between different pitch accents. So because I'd already been studying standard Japanese for 3 or 4 years at that point, yeah, I didn't want my Japanese to sound like, or to get fragmented again. So I purposely tried not to pick up, to never mimic the local dialect, even though I understand it, no problem. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's see. For reference, I'm in Osaka and had that decent sized one this year. Andy, so are you talking about, okay, so you're talking about the earthquake again. Yeah, for me, the one that I experienced in Oita, I mean, it was big, the biggest one I've ever experienced. But still, it was like, for me, that was the first time I had experienced an earthquake that large in the 5 or 6 years at that point I'd been living in Japan. So that single thing, again, no damage or anything like that, it wasn't enough to dissuade me to go back to the States and, you know, give away all the conveniences and all the investments that I've, or all the time and money and effort that I put into Japan thus far. Okay, Ten Simon, I'm working on a YouTube channel of me talking in Japanese, mostly talking about issues I care about: education, children, social change, global warming, etc. Do you have any advice? Well, yes and no. I think there's kind of general advice, and then there's going to be specific advice. So my general advice is that YouTube wants you to upload long content, and they want you to upload regularly. So I think if you just want to grow your content, then that's a good option. But I think that, or grow your audience, so to speak. But I think that when you do that and you concentrate on quantity rather than quality, I think the viewers pick up on that. So like for me, my YouTube channel is pretty small. It's like 50,000 people. I mean, that's nothing compared to like most of my friends that do YouTube, like Joey the Anime Man, or like Chris Broad, or any of those guys. They all have, you know, like 1 million subscribers. PDR is another one. But just in terms of like the community and like finances and stuff like that, we actually make pretty comparable, from my understanding, income through our collective online endeavors. And that's because my content is so specific that the people that are into it are really into it. So like the Patreon pitch accent stuff that I do on here, I think I have a much higher ratio of like patrons to subscribers than the rest of those guys. And that's because I don't concentrate on quantity, I concentrate on quality. And I like to think that you guys, the subscribers, pick up on that, and that you would rather have the kind of videos that I've produced up until this point rather than just a bunch of like vlogs, so to speak. So I hope that answered your question, Ten Simon. Be specific. Don't be afraid to trust your intuitions, and also be opinionated, I think, is a very important thing. If you try and please everyone, everyone will pick up on that and they'll hate you. So be opinionated, and people, I think, that'll resonate more for people. That'd be my advice. Okay, original agent. Hi, Dogen. I was wondering if there are general restrictions on having multiple jobs in Japan, or does it just depend on the job? It depends on the job. So most jobs will say, standard jobs, they'll say, this is your normal job, and if you do anything else, you either can't do anything else, or if you do something else, then you at least have to let us know what you're doing. So that's, I let the people in my office at my normal job, I let them know what I was doing a very, very long time ago. So you can probably do it, but I think that there's also, you got to be aware of, there's a lot of like red tape and privacy issues and stuff like that. So like YouTube is actually something that you got to be kind of careful with. If you want to be like an accountant, and then you also want to be, I don't know, like a student recruiter or something like that, that's probably fine. But if you want to do YouTube and then you want to do accounting, and you accidentally like share client information or stuff like that, obviously that's going to be a major issue. So yeah, it really just depends on the job, but for the most part, it's fine as long as you're good with privacy. That's an enormous mug. Yeah, it is pretty big, like my green tea. Okay, so TJ, I'm currently trying to decide whether I should work and live in my home country, Australia, or Japan. Pay and benefits are better in Australia, but housing and cost of living is cheaper in Japan. In addition, I'm worried about raising any kids in my fiance, and I would have in Japan. Do you have any advice? I'm going to make a separate video about this, but I think that if there's any chance that you can live in Japan and do a job like through the internet where your income comes from out of Japan, I think that's the ideal situation. Because like you mentioned, you're getting a lot of money right now in Australia, but housing and cost of living would be cheaper in Japan. So you would be able to save even more money and benefit. I don't know what the benefits are in Australia, but I mean, like health insurance and all that stuff is perfectly fine in Japan. So that would be my advice. Try and work and live in Japan if you can do that while getting your salary, your income from outside of Japan. In addition, I'm worried about raising, so with regards to raising your kids and your fiance, as long as your Japanese is okay, I don't think it would be really any issue. So as long as you're serious about developing your Japanese abilities, I don't think raising kids in Japan would ever be an issue. Can you comment on similarity or contrast between U.S. and Japanese university culture? I teach at a U.S. university right now and love it. So considering Japanese universities as an option, thanks. Yes, so I think there's one major, go Huskies, hey, Stephen. One major difference between Japanese universities and, well, there's multiple differences, but the difference that really stands out for me between Japanese universities and American universities is that in the States, everyone spends their 4 years working hard and playing hard, and then working hard, that's the studies. What they study, they actually use that skill set that they develop and that knowledge towards their end goal. So like for me, I studied Japanese in university, and then I ended up using that because I applied and got into the JET program where I taught English in Japan. So obviously knowing Japanese helped a lot for that particular job. You use the skills that you acquire at university for your job out once you graduate. But in Japan, it's actually, people don't typically do that, even though it may sound ridiculous, or it may sound, you may be very surprised to hear that, but people typically study as hard as they can their whole life all the way up through high school Then once they get into university, it's mostly that work hard, play hard mentality is mostly play hard, because once you're into university and you've got like a strong university's name, whether that's, you know, University of Tokyo or Kyoto or Waseda or Keio or wherever it might be, that'll be the only thing, not the only thing, but that'll be the primary thing that most employers will look at when hiring. So people, what they study in university often has nothing to do with what they do out once they start working. So like all of my friends from Keio University in Tokyo, they all studied like topics that had nothing to do with what they ended up doing. So like I had a friend that studied like anthropology and like psychology, and it ended up going to like Mazda, you know, the car company, and building cars and stuff like that. So that's a major difference, and that always was very, very odd to me, but it's mostly just a cultural difference. And I want to also add to that by saying that people in Japan, in the past, this is changing a lot recently, but they usually stay at the same company for their whole entire lives. So even if they don't study something that they can use directly, immediately at their job, the company knows that if they're smart enough to get into the University of Tokyo, for example, who cares what they studied, because we'll have this genius at our company for the next 40 years at least. So we'll hire him anyway, is my understanding of how that system has managed to keep Japan afloat for this, well, post World War II, basically. Okay, let's see. Let's see. From a fellow linguistic C person, thanks so much for your pitch accent videos. You're welcome. Thank you very much for appreciating them and using them, and for your support through Patreon. I'd love to attend a Japanese university, but I want to study STEM-related topics, so I think that would be difficult. I think it would be too. The one university that you might look into would be like Tsukuba University in, I think, Ibaraki, I think is where it was, Ibaraki-ken. Anyways, I think it was Tsukuba Daigaku. I think they have a STEM-related topic, and that specific university, they study really, really hard. Let's see. I don't know if you talked about JLPT before, but I would like to know what you think about it. So original agent, I think the JLPT is mostly a waste of time. I mean, having the certification really helps in like a job resume, but I think in terms of like actual Japanese fluency, there's no reason that you have to study for the JLPT in order to become fluent. You can pursue a completely different study trajectory and still end up just as fluent, if not more fluent, than if you had used resources that are specifically made for you know, the JLPT. And the JLPT doesn't have a speaking section, which I think is a crime almost. So I've never been a big fan of the JLPT, and the only reason that I got it is because I knew I'd be in Japan for probably the rest of my life. So having N1 is just, it's a good general thing to have if you're going to be in Japan for 50 years. So, hello, Paula-chan. Paula-chan. Interested in becoming a freelance translator, currently English teacher. Besides passing N1, do you have any advice for working in freelance translation? Do companies prefer native Japanese speakers? Well, I think this is an interesting question. They don't prefer to have native Japanese speakers if they're translating out of Japanese. So I've got a friend that works at Square Enix, the Final Fantasy game creator company, developer rather, publisher. And he's a native English speaker. He's from the UK. And so, you know, he translates from Japanese into English. So it doesn't really matter what your native English is, what your native language is. It all really depends on what language you're going to be translating into. So they probably wouldn't hire you for English to Japanese translation, but for the other way around, I think it would probably be fine. But the one thing that I would, I'd like to add to that is that, are you actually interested in translation? because for a long time I told myself that I was interested in translation because it was the only thing I could think of outside of teaching English that I could do as work in Japan. But once I started doing it, or I realized that I really didn't like it at all. So, and the money also isn't that particularly good. So if you are really into translation and you like it, by all means pursue it, but try to avoid using translation, or to try and see if you're using translation as, just think about whether or not that's something that you really want to do as a profession. And if it is, by all means, go for it. Okay, Joseph, how can I develop? How can I develop a better ear for Japanese? After a year and a half, still don't understand very well. The best thing you can do to develop your own ear for Japanese, in my opinion, is to listen to a lot of Japanese native recordings, like all the time, like even when you're sleeping. I did that for multiple years. And also to record yourself on a regular basis. I think recording yourself on a regular basis is the single most effective exercise you can do, not only for developing your own accent, but for hearing, for listening as well. And I don't know what it is, but in trying to speak a foreign language, oftentimes during the exercise of speaking itself, you become conscious of different sounds, and you think, oh, this is that sound. And you kind of start to finally realize little things only after you've started to record yourself. So I think I've mentioned this multiple times on my Patreon, but I couldn't hear a lot of the Japanese pitch accent patterns until I started trying to say them. Then once I started trying to say them, I had a much easier time being able to pick up on them. So listen to Japanese native recordings all the time. Don't listen to other foreign speakers speaking Japanese, and record yourself all the time. That's not feasible, like at least 20 minutes a day. Okay, Nuke Marine, how's the live stream been going? I hope it's going well. I'm having a good time. Also, if there's any institution you recommend for learning translation, thank you in advance. Love your videos and learning a lot. I don't know any particular institutions that would be good. The one thing that I would recommend doing is developing a translation portfolio by yourself. So like if there's like a short story that you like a lot in Japanese, like maybe even one chapter of that, or like a movie or something like that, try translating that like seriously by yourself. And then once you start applying for translation jobs, you can show them, you know, this is, I've done this. This wasn't paid work. I did this by myself, but they can at least use that as a reference point. So that'd be my advice. How did you go about studying Japanese grammar? So during my time at KO, all of my study hours outside of the classroom I spent on phonetics and hanging out with other native speakers. But in the classroom, we studied grammar. And I may have talked about this before, but I studied very diligently during university. So like I never drank, I never partied or anything like that. And so I took my studies very seriously. And so even though the way that they taught grammar in the Japanese programs in both University of Washington at KO, I mean, it was nothing spectacular. It was pretty standard. As long as you take that standard information and curriculum very seriously, it's more than enough to develop a strong foundation. So that's what I did. I just took the basics very seriously. So yeah, I studied very hard for like all the tests and stuff like that. And I think like all the N1 grammar and stuff like that, I just kind of did cram sessions, and I've forgotten most of it because you literally never use a lot of like the archaic N1 grammar. Like it never shows up ever. But I think up to like N2 grammar, I'm pretty strong. And another thing that helped a lot with that was trying to do a lot of creative writing in Japanese, then having it corrected by Japanese speakers through programs like Language Aid or High Native or whatever it might be. Okay. Nuke Marine, out of interest, what has been your take on the efficacy of all Japanese all the time types of approaches, sentence mining and immersion, basically? Okay, so I think all Japanese all the time is an extremely effective approach to learning the language. And I think it's probably the best approach if your number one goal is speaking and being able to understand spoken Japanese very well rather than, reading and writing and stuff like that. So I think a combination of all Japanese all the time and then a little bit of phonetics on the side to kind of accelerate that process and pick up on things like pitch accent early on is probably the best approach for developing a very strong accent and pronunciation. So I think it's a very good idea. Okay, and you also avoid hearing non-native Japanese if you do all Japanese all the time. So I think that's a good thing as well. Okay, so Artemis Prime asked this similar question, so hopefully that answered it. Georgius. Hey, Dogan, I'm thinking of applying to a Japanese university to study computer science. Any advice? I'm not sure what you're asking. Like, if you're asking about like the application process, or if you're asking whether you think it would be a good idea, like if you've already been accepted to study computer science at a Japanese university. So if you want to, if your question is the former, then I think studying Japanese as much as possible before applying would be a very good idea, very effective, as well as computer science. And I think that if you've already been accepted, I actually think that computer science specifically would probably be more effective to study at a non-Japanese university, because I've found that Japanese universities are typically a little bit behind the kind of world standard when it comes to curriculum, especially when it comes to technology. Maybe outside of technology, no problem, but like not technology, computer science specifically. So like a lot of Japanese companies use really old, outdated coding for like their websites and stuff like that. So if you want to be at the forefront of computer science, I would encourage you taking actually something like an online course or something like that, and then just studying Japanese on the side if you're more interested in developing your skill set rather than just getting a certification and a diploma from a reputable university. So, okay, Alvin, if you have time, can you go into more detail about your time as an ALT? Specifically, I want to know what you did to transition into a more permanent job in Japan. What was it a catalyst for you? Yeah, so that's a good question. I'll try and be a little bit concise about this, even though it'll probably take a long time because it's a very long story. But so I got interested in learning Japanese when I was like 13 because I heard of this band called Softball, a punk rock girls band, and I fell in love with their music, and I started listening to Japanese by myself, or studying Japanese by myself. And when I was studying abroad in Japan, I was lucky enough to actually meet them and like speak at length with the main singer of the band. And she basically inspired me to get into a creative profession. For me, it was creative writing. And then I learned to develop, I learned that I'm a little bit better at comedy than I am at the other, not topics, but styles, so to speak, when it comes to creative writing. So I knew even before I graduated from university that my end goal was to become a creative writer and kind of comedic-based creative writer in Japan, in Japanese. That would be my kind of life goal, so to speak. So from my first couple like weeks even on the JET program, I was already writing a lot in Japanese and having that corrected by native speakers. So I spent the whole entire 3 years in the JET program studying creative writing in Japanese, doing creative writing. And so by the time that I finished the JET program, my creative writing in Japanese, it's still definitely not native, but I think it's at a point where a native can read it and enjoy it and kind of forgive any minor grammar or word choice issues that may exist within the writing. I think that the ideas that are in the writing are strong enough for the writing to stand by itself, so to speak. So hopefully that answered your question. I knew before starting the JET program what I wanted to do, so I spent my whole entire time in the JET program, all my free time, practicing to develop that skill set. Okay, so TJ, I'm interested in hearing about your study habits post N1? Did you completely ditch grammar books and just read novels, watch shows, etc.? Yes. So once I got N1, I stopped studying, doing traditional studies. I never touched an Anki app ever again. I never opened any like grammar textbooks or anything like that. I still have a bunch of like phonetics textbooks, obviously, because I use those and I reference those when creating my phonetics lessons, but I went all in on the creative writing side. So I started the creative writing my first year in the JET program, switched to N1 studies like after a year or a year and a half. I think I mentioned that earlier. And then once I got N1, I switched back to the creative writing. So, okay, Nuke Marine, best way to translate things that have been translated. You can compare your results to something. Oh, okay, you're talking to Hello Paula. Okay, so hello Paula, if you're still watching, hopefully you saw Nuke Marine's comment. Okay, yeah, you did, sorry. Fantastic, thank you. Okay, let's see. So stanza. So I think the comments are starting to kind of pile up a little bit, so I'm going to try and like go a little bit quicker. Do you have any recommendations regarding locations on the internet, audiobooks, etc., where you can find good native recordings of native speakers? Yeah, no, actually, I think the best approach is to buy traditional Japanese media, like a DVD or whatever. Actually, Netflix. Netflix is probably the best option. I don't know what Netflix is like in the States right now, but there's a lot of quality Japanese content on Netflix. So you can just stream the same episode or the same movie over and over and over again on Netflix. And you can download Netflix like episodes and stuff to your phone as well, mobile devices. So I think that's probably the best option. When I was studying Japanese, it was, sorry, I think it was, okay, never mind. I think I'm okay. I just used the DVD. Like I bought a DVD, I ripped the DVD, I used the audio, and I just listened to it all the time. Okay. For videos in Japanese, do you have any native Japanese person double check your scripts beforehand? It depends on the video. So I never have natives check the entire script except for scripts that are like particularly important to me. So like I did a video called Sweet Carrots and Sweet Potatoes, I think that was about racism in Japan, my take on racism in Japan. And that was the first video in, I think, like a year and a half that I had a native speaker check the whole thing just to make sure, because I was very particular about the points that I wanted to make. But for normal videos that I make on YouTube, maybe there will be like 1 or 2 word choice issues in the video. I think on the average video where I'll ask my wife, like, is this natural? But other than that, it's very rare that I'll have a native person check the entire script, maybe like once a year. And there's a whole lot of videos where none of the video is ever checked by any native speaker. So I've made like a ton of videos that where like my wife was out of the house when I wrote the script and I just recorded it as is. So for the most part, natives don't see the scripts. Maybe 1 or 2 not lines, like a 1 or 2 word choice issues in a script, and then maybe like once a year, maybe once every year and a half, if there's a script that's really important to me, I'll have a native look over that. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, I meant without visual, something that can be listened to on a train or in the car in the background. So I still think that Netflix is probably the best option. You can download the episode, and if you want to like save battery life or whatever, you can just use like a audio hacking program or whatever to just extract the audio file and listen to that on repeat. And if that's too much of a hassle, you can just buy like a DVD and do a similar process. Like if Netflix has like protection issues on like writing and stuff like that. So. Okay, hopefully that answered your question. Hi from Bellingham, Washington. Hey, I'm studying linguistics and Japanese and really appreciate your videos. Do you ever miss the Pacific Northwest? I'm afraid I will miss it if I ever live in Japan after I graduate. This is an interesting question. I've never been homesick, and while I like the Pacific Northwest a lot, I've never thought, oh man, like I really miss it. Like I wish that I wasn't in Japan. I wish I was back in the States. And I think that's a lot of that is just my personality. I don't mind being alone. And so like the entire time I was in the JET program, I was always alone studying basically. But yeah, for me, I'm kind of a loner. So it's getting homesick and like going back to like a welcoming community was never something that I felt like I really needed. Okay, I talk with my parents a fair amount, like over Skype, and I have a couple of close relatives, like my brother and my cousin that I speak with regularly. But I never thought I want to go back to the States after coming to Japan, and I certainly never thought before coming to Japan, will I miss the States if I go to Japan? Like that was never an issue for me. The entire time I wasn't in Japan, I was thinking I'm moving to Japan permanently. So I think that if you think you may miss the Pacific Northwest, I think there's a good probability that you will. And so for you, maybe a short-term deal in Japan, like 1 or 2 years would be good. And then going back to the States, maybe Seattle, and getting like a job at like Nintendo in Redmond or something like that, where you can use Japanese there, that might be a good option. So hopefully that answers your question. I listen to podcasts. Yeah, podcasts are good. NHK News is good for listening. It's pretty stale because it's news. For me specifically, I don't like listening to the news too much, but it's certainly a good option. Can you do a shout out to Henri for me? Andy. She wanted to watch, but she's at work. Hey, Andy. Hello, this is Dogen. This is your shout out. TJ wanted me to say hello, so hello. Hopefully this is okay. Let's see. Original agent. Are you into classical Japanese? Oh, how far back are we? Okay, not too bad. Are you into classical Japanese language? Do you know good resources to learn it? No, I can't read any Japanese that's more than coherently, that's more than about 80-ish years old, maybe 100 years old max. And I don't know any good resources specifically, but most of the resources that I've seen have all been written resources. So there's a lot of good information online, but I think if you're really interested in learning classical Japanese, you probably should look for like a good book on the topic. That'd be my advice. Just something consolidated that you can hold and look through. Okay, Nuke Marine, I wanted to compliment your pitch series. It's one of those things that existed, but I hope this helps for many years to come. Well, thank you very much. I'm really glad that all you guys find the pitch accent series and the pronunciation series helpful. I mean, it really means the world to me, and it's provided me with this office and my condo and everything. So thank you for your support and appreciating the series. Okay, yeah, genre was the word I was looking for, Laura. Thank you. I've been studying Japanese for years. My gap, yeah. So I'll have to think about it. Okay, yeah. I would encourage you to think about it. Gurgis, sorry, I don't know how to say your name, but keep thinking about it. That's probably the best option for now, or my piece of advice. Don't jump in too quickly. Okay, let's see. Do you believe that accent dissonance is a thing? That is, believing your own accent is in a foreign language is worse than it is even when hearing yourself recorded? I don't know about accent specifically. I know that a lot of people are uncomfortable with hearing themselves speak. So I think that if you're experiencing accent dissonance, so to speak, it'd probably just be a side effect of that general phenomenon of when you hear your own voice and you feel like that feels a little bit odd to me. So if you hear yourself, if you can listen to yourself speaking English and not experience any form of that dissonance, then I think that it's, but it does occur with Japanese, then it's probably a Japanese specific thing, obviously. But if you feel uncomfortable when you hear yourself speak even in English, then I wouldn't worry about it. Okay. Speaking about creative writing, are there any texts that teach creative writing in Japanese? I've had trouble finding resources. 1 second. One second. So when I was on the JET program, I bought this book. is this backwards right now? I don't know. It says 小説を書きたい人の本. So a book for people who want to write novels. I mean, it's directed for Japanese people, but I referred to this book a fair amount when I was on the JET program when I was writing. Like, I think you can probably see like the highlights that I've made and stuff like that. There's not too much about creative writing. It's more about like how to create like a good story and stuff like that. But there are a few things in terms of like the taigen dome, for example. It's like when you end a sentence with a noun and you purposely create like a fragment. There's a few things like that. So if you're into creative writing and like want to improve your writing in general and you're comfortable reading in Japanese, this is actually a really good resource. There was another book I read that was similar. It was like, あなたも小説家になれる. It's like you too can become a writer or a novelist. But I really didn't like that book. It felt very pretentious. So yeah, I recommend this one, but not that one. Okay. Let's see. Can I ask, do your Japanese friends, colleagues also find your short lessons hilarious? How does the sense of humor translate? That's a really good question. My humor, for the most part, is directed specifically for people, not necessarily foreigners, but just people that were brought up outside of Japan and then have come to Japan. So whether that's a Japanese person that was brought up in the States and then came to Japan, or for someone that, like an American like myself, that's the main audience. So for example, the Honne Tatemae video that I made recently, a lot of Japanese people, from my understanding, didn't like it. They were like uncomfortable watching it and stuff like that. But it was one of my best hits, so to speak. The reception was really good for my standard audience. So I think most of the jokes the Japanese people understand as well, but I think they hit harder for foreigners and Japanese people that were brought up in the States that then came to Japan. So hopefully that answers your question. There's a little bit of stuff that Japanese people just don't find funny, and I think that's because a lot of it is framed specifically from an outsider's perspective, so to speak. Okay, can I ask, do you find your, okay. On the comedy side of things, have you been approached by Japanese media to do material for them? Have I? No, not that I can remember. I mean, I've had like various like YouTube jimusho, so like, what do you call it? Like agencies, Japanese agency, like YouTube agencies. I forget what you call them. They've approached me, but like TV has never approached me. And I think, again, that's probably because my humor isn't traditional Japanese humor, so to speak, which Japanese humor is typically a lot more slapstick. So, okay, I was definitely thinking 1 or 2 more years would be a good option for me. Yeah, definitely keep thinking about it. What's your suggestion to get the best out of having one-on-one private teacher to improve speaking quickly? Well, I think the number one thing that I always recommend for people that do one-on-one lessons is to try and find a teacher that is aware of like pitch accent in Japanese and like has a basic understanding of the topic. Because if they don't really know what they're correcting. They know that it's wrong and they can hear that it's wrong, but they don't know how to teach it. All they can do is say the native word, hoping that you can perhaps hear it a little bit clearer if you say it slower, so to speak. So, for example, if you have a native speaker that you work with regularly, give me 1 second. My books are on the floor right now below my desk. So when it comes to pronunciation, this book, 音声を教える。音声 Let me check that real quick. 音声 Onse. That's an exception to the form or two kanji rule. Onse or osieru. This is a really, really good book for general pronunciation, and it's in Japanese. So I reference this book a lot in my lessons. This would be a good thing to buy for a Japanese person that is going to be correcting your Japanese in private lessons. And then when it comes to pitch accent, sorry, I don't know where it is right now, but the NHK accent dictionary is probably it's in my closet. It's probably the best option. So hopefully that answers your question. Try and get someone that understands Japanese phonetics, and if they don't, buy them a resource that explains things in a clear manner. Okay. Yep, no problem. Hopefully that book is useful for you. Okay. I want to hear a love story. How did you meet your wife? She actually read something that I wrote online in Japanese where I basically, well, I made a YouTube video about it. It's like the ALT conference, training conference, which I think is basically just a colossal waste of time and money, where it's like all the ALTs and English teachers for each prefecture get together and they're supposed to do like brainstorming, but it's just like everyone's like, why are we here? Including the Japanese teachers. So I wrote a piece about that basically framed the whole event as a competition to see who could waste the most amount of tax dollars. And my wife read that and she found it funny, and because I used to have a blog, and she found that. And she reached out to me, and then we started talking, and before you know it, we're married. Okay, so let's see. Hopefully that answers your question. What's your opinion on remembering the kanji and in the learning process? Word of warning, I'll challenge you to a fight to the death if it's a negative opinion. What's your opinion on remembering the kanji in the learning process? So you've written remembering the kanji with a capital R. Does that mean this is like a Japanese resource? Is this like a book or something? Because if it is, I have not heard of it. And that's because oh, okay. Yeah. His book. I've never read it. And that's because, again, the only time that I've ever really studied kanji is just in normal studies, like in the classroom and stuff like that. And then I did like a fair amount of, like looking up one kanji at a time when I was like reading books and stuff like that. But for me, I don't know. I don't want to sound like a jerk when I say this, but kanji has never really been an issue. And I don't know if it's because I'm good at acquiring kanji, or if it's just because for me, like my hobby for a long time was studying Japanese. So I got like a lot of kanji. I learned a lot of kanji through osmosis, so to speak, when I was doing like my creative writing in Japanese. This is embarrassing, as I made 70 hours of videos teaching how to write 1,100 kanji from that book. I was a fan. It was all. Well, I mean, I've heard very good things about all the resources that this person, James, has created. And he's like, a titan in the Japanese language learning sphere, so to speak. But for me, I'm more of a phonetics kind of guy. So I just can't really comment on the book or kanji in general in detail. So apologies for that. But I understand that it's my understanding is that it's a good resource. Do you know Koto? He taught at UW. Koto. Was his name Koto? The professor that I knew at University of Washington was Ota Sensei. So it was a guy and his Japanese guy and his female wife, not his female, his American wife. So two Ota senseis that were basically in charge of the Japanese program when I was there. I don't remember Koto. I might know him if I saw him. Yeah, female wife. Hey. I might know him if I saw him, but I don't remember him off the top of my head. I did really like Ota Sensei a lot, both of them. They were great. Do you have any thoughts on doing CIR on JET? This is a very interesting question. Oh, 1 second, I gotta look at this. I live in Tokyo and I can't get past intermediate speaking level. Any suggestions to level up? Right now, I'm watching Terrace House on Netflix every day to get more vocabulary. I don't know how long you've been studying and how seriously you study, but if you've been studying for a long time and you feel like you're kind of stuck, again, the number one thing that I would recommend is practicing speaking and recording yourself. I found that that always helps a lot with like breaking barriers, so to speak, when it comes to those plateaus, learning plateaus. Also, speaking to yourself in Japanese a lot, I think helps a lot as well. Like watch a movie and then like with the momentum of that Japanese mindset, just go straight into speaking for yourself for like an hour or like an hour and a half and just do that all the time. And then once you like leave your apartment or go and do whatever you need to do, you'll still be in that Japanese mindset and it'll keep coming out. So I found that that's helped a lot for me. Okay, so do you have any thoughts on doing CIR on JET? Yes and no. I think that it's probably a great idea if you're trying to get the most out of your general experience in Japan while you're on the JET program. Like you'll learn a lot of Japanese, you'll make a lot of good connections with your community and stuff like that. But it's more demanding than teaching English, from my understanding. So I don't want to say I specifically avoided it because I knew that I'd have more free time to do what I wanted if I was teaching English. But I do understand that CIRs generally have more responsibilities than their English teaching counterparts. So I think it's a good idea if, again, if you're just trying to get the most out of your general experience, like 3-5 years in Japan. So I can, but never takes it. You made it now. Oh, thank you very much, Nick Marine. How did you make friends when you first moved to Japan? Has that changed over time? This is a very interesting question as well. I don't have any Japanese friends. So I have one Japanese male friend from when I was studying abroad at Keio University. So there's like one guy that I really clicked with and I'm still in touch with him. But I never had any male Japanese friends the entire time I was in the JET program. I had my Japanese girlfriend at the time, and I talked to her a fair amount, but I would never like go out and hang out with like Japanese friends, people, because I didn't have any Japanese friends, so to speak. There was one family that I'm still kind of close with in Oita that I met through another ALT at the time. So I would occasionally hang out with that family, with the other like ALTs. But again, I'm kind of a loner, so I spent a lot of time alone, and I never really went out to try and like make friends or anything like that. Hopefully that answers your question. Thanks for making the time to do this, even if you could squeeze in occasional live streams without overworking yourself, you have more, be great fun and enlightening. Cheers and good night. I'll certainly try. I think once I finish moving in, I'll have a little bit more time right now. You guys can't see my room, but it's a mess right now. I will try and do this more often though. So thank you for appreciating this. It means a lot to me because I'm, I don't have a lot of free time. So it's good to know that people appreciate this. Out of interest, how many in this stream currently live in Japan? Okay. JK Vegan Abroad. Okay, my Japanese is poor right now. I'm barely N5, but I'm moving to Japan soon on a 1-year teaching English contract. I want to take private lessons in Tokyo, but is it difficult to find affordable tuition? I don't know. I've never done one-on-one lessons with like a private teacher. I've always just, I had a fair amount of Japanese friends when I was learning Japanese at the university level, not when I was in the JET program, and that's because I wanted to communicate in Japanese with my peers. So like I avoided hanging out for the most part with the other exchange students and tried to only hang out with Japanese students. So rather than getting a tutor, I would actually try and encourage you. I would encourage you to try and make some Japanese friends that you can communicate with. Although I just kind of made a whole rant about how I don't make any Japanese friends. Well, again, in the early stages when I was still learning, concentrating on speaking rather than creative writing, it's a good idea to make as many Japanese friends as possible, and it's always good to have that support base of friends and community. But for me, after I got to the conversational level that I was pleased with, and I moved back to the States and kind of naturally stopped communicating with a lot of those people, for me, I was always more interested in developing my skill set than kind of like socializing. So, but if you want to improve your general speaking abilities, making Japanese friends is always a good option. So, and again, depending on how social you are as a person, that'll also influence how much those interactions also mean to you. So. Okay, funnily enough, I was struggling to find a click with many Japanese guys. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I've got one very close, very close Japanese male friend, and that's about it. I basically have no other Japanese men. I mean, just my wife, on the female side that I speak with regularly. And that's not because they're bad and I'm good, or because I'm bad and they're good. It's just, I think, different interests. So I found that some foreigners in Japan have great relationships and tons of Japanese friends, and others like me. I mean, it really all comes down to personality. If you're a really social person, like I just mentioned, you'll have more friends probably naturally, and you'll enjoy that time more. So. Okay, what other languages are you tempted or have learned? Also, what are your thoughts on similarities between Japanese and Korean? So I don't know enough about Korean to kind of make an informed opinion or thoughts on the similarities between Japanese and Korean. I know that the grammar is quite similar and that there are some similarities in the pronunciation, although Korean, in my understanding, is generally more complicated. But I tried learning Korean just for a little bit because my wife speaks Korean, and I was interested in it for a little while, but I kind of got a little busy with YouTube stuff, so I gave up. And I also studied Spanish for a fair amount just during high school. But right now, I'm not interested in learning any additional languages, and that's because I know that as a result of doing that, my English and my Japanese will suffer, and I don't want that to happen. Okay, any audiobook for intermediate level you would recommend? Basically anything by Murakami Haruki is usually pretty good because he has the tendency to use simple grammar and simple words and phrases. I don't really like Murakami Haruki as a writer, but a lot of people do. But as a study resource, I think it would be great for the intermediate level. Okay. On a friend side note of things, since I do karaoke, people around the pubs know me. I also got a lot of friends technically through my Japanese wife's many friends. Yeah, so for me, like I haven't been to karaoke in like more than 5 years. And I haven't been to a foreigner bar in the same amount of time. So yeah, I just don't do a lot of socializing. I get the most out of like being at home with my family and then also my creative writing. So don't have a specific question, but I just want to echo the sentiments expressed by many others above. My significant other and I find your videos to be very original, very helpful, and of really high quality. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the kind words, Roy. I appreciate that. Pajama Man. I have trouble juggling a number of resources, including Genki, Onikani, a grammar dictionary, your phonetics videos, etc. However, I find it hard to put my own thoughts into words. Any suggestions? Yeah, so I almost always recommend not studying holistically. Like I think it's more effective to concentrate on just phonetics for a long time and then study holistically after that. So I wouldn't recommend watching my videos and trying to do wani kani and pick up grammar and kanji all at the same time. What I would recommend is just doing the phonetics videos. And then once you've done that for like, I don't know, between 3 and 6 months, or once you find that you're at a level that you think you've made a significant amount of improvement and maybe you're at a point where you're noticing diminishing returns, that would be a good time to switch into grammar or vocab or whatever it might be. Yeah, and that includes articulating your thoughts. I think that it's normal to not be able to articulate your thoughts very well during that phonetics concentration period. So like when I was studying abroad, my accent was very good, but I couldn't articulate myself at all. So, but that basically, I got over that problem once I stopped studying phonetics actively. So, okay, let's see. Dark Trooper, do you know an Ed at UW? He was an ALT and studied Japanese linguistics, and I think his teacher was Otoko, and his teacher was Otoko or something like that. I do not know Ed. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know who Ed is. Apologies for that. Kimi no Nawa, which is $21 on audible.com. Kimi no Nawa, I think that was a really good movie. I can't really speak about how effective that would be for studies. Probably a good option. I just think that maybe there wasn't as much dialogue as other movies like 12 Kind Japanese People, Junin no Yasashi Nihonjin. That movie is like packed with dialogue from beginning to end. So that's a good one. Although it's not an intermediate level. So it's more advanced. Okay. Let's see. Team Introverted. Yeah. Hey. What are your thoughts or experiences of reading along with audiobooks? Also reading along with subtitles while watching shows. Do you mean shadowing? Always associating shadowing with repeating the text. Well, I think shadowing is a really great exercise in general. Usually what I would do though is I would put a movie on, whatever movie that might be, and I would like leave it on like literally on my computer nonstop for like a week. Like I wouldn't turn my computer off and the movie would be playing like the whole entire time. Again, like even while I was sleeping or whatever. So usually because if the average movie is 2 hours and you can go through that 12 times a day and you're going to be doing seven days a week. So that's, you're going to be watching the movie probably at least not watching, but you'll hear the movie either consciously or subconsciously 75 times, probably at least during that week. So for me, it was like, I would kind of go in and out between like actively listening to it and shadowing like while watching at my desk, and then like leaving it on and doing something like the dishes and like anticipating the next lines and the conversation and stuff like that. So for me, shadowing I think is very effective, but I don't think you have to be shadowing all the time that you're watching a Japanese movie, so to speak, in order to get those benefits. So. Oh, the Kimi no Na audiobook, which has 6.5 hours of audio. Since I just watched the movie, description of the scenes was just more was that more visceral. I don't know too much about the audiobook or like how much it differs from the text, but if you enjoyed it, I think that's probably a good experience. Although 6.5 hours is a little bit long for me, I think I would try and encourage people to go like 2 hours or like an hour, just because 6.5 hours, it takes a long time to get through that and then to repeat it so that you can get that long-term memory going. So do you still experience weird treatment, i.e. Nihongo Jouzu, despite getting to the level you are now? That means you are bad at Japanese. Well, it kind of means that you're bad at Japanese, but it kind of doesn't mean that you're bad at Japanese because, like, if you're at a convenience store or something and they ask you, like, do you want, I don't know, like a fork or something, and you say, yeah, kekko, kekko desu. You can say that even if the rest of your Japanese is really bad, or if your Japanese is really good. And but if that's the only thing that they hear, then they'll probably say, "Ah, Nihongo jouzu desu ne," right? So it's regardless of how good your Japanese gets, I still hear Nihongo jouzu desu ne all the time, and that's just because there's a lot of instances in Japan where you only say like one or two lines, and it's normal for people not to know that you've already been living in Japan for 10 years and that you teach Japanese online. So yeah, I still do hear it a fair amount, even though my Japanese is pretty good. Okay, so hey Dogen, still in high school and taking your phonetics series. It's been really helpful, but I was wondering if there's any more I can do along with phonetics. I only started learning Japanese about 3 months ago. Sorry, I was reading some additional comments. Well, I think that I've mentioned some other good exercises. Like if you're still in high school, you're in a good place to be because your ears are still picking up a lot of the minor differences that, well, not necessarily just your ears, but you'll have an easier time mimicking foreign languages than someone that's like in their 30s or 40s. So keep on studying, even if you get a little bit bored with it, if it's something that you think right now that you'll end up using in the long run. And also, as I talked about earlier, pick like a movie and watch it on repeat all the time, like for a year. And that'll do more for all of your Japanese abilities combined. I'm not combined, like all of your Japanese abilities, speaking, listening, writing, not writing, but reading, surprisingly, if you have the subtitles on as well. Than if you like studied outside, or if you took like a Japanese course in your high school, something like that. So, okay, you might be reading the situation wrong. Did they speak English? Compliment their English. Turn down the compliment. Okay, I'm not reading. Okay, congratulations on the new home. I'll get the keys for my new apartment this Tuesday, so I can relate with your enthusiasm about your place. Congratulations to you as well, and thank you for the kind words. It feels amazing to be here. Finally. I would show you this room right now, but it's a mess, and I showed it in the condo video, so probably nothing more to see other than the mess. Let's see. Not sure how much time is left, but my last question. I was trying to study the pitch accent from Tokyo Sonata, as you suggested. However, I have trouble catching all the words. No Japanese subtitles. Okay. What I would encourage you to do if you're going to be speaking, doing speaking exercises and shadowing, do that with like a Japanese textbook, and then you can use the Tokyo Sonata for kind of general phonetic awareness. So even if you don't understand everything that's being said, if you keep that going constantly, your ears will get used to hearing natural Japanese. So even if you can't repeat that, it's still good to immerse yourself in natural Japanese, just because you need that constant input of Japanese. So yeah, go get like a Genki textbook or something like that, or just some like word lists online that have audio files or like short sentences and stuff like that. And you can do shadowing with content that you do understand. And once your Japanese gets a little bit more advanced, then you can switch to like a normal Japanese movie or something like that. But keep watching a normal Japanese movie anyways. Okay. Let's see. Dogen, what have been some positive negative experiences with non-Japanese in Japan? What's a common mistake you notice non-Japanese make, either social or in the language? Well, with regards to language, I mean, all of you guys know about pitch accent because you're signed up for my series, but the overwhelming majority of foreigners that study Japanese don't study pitch accent. So typically when I hear other foreigners speak Japanese, I hear a lot of like mistakes in their pitch accent. But other than that, yeah. The other thing, the other thing that I think is really interesting, this has nothing to do with language, but I notice a lot of people that kind of get disillusioned after coming to Japan, and like people that have been in Japan for like 5 or 6 years, and then they start detesting Japan. That they start blaming all their problems on Japan and stuff like that. And I think that, um, well, that's just something I've noticed. I don't want to articulate, try and articulate any further detailed thoughts on that matter right now. It's just, yeah, I noticed that some foreigners get disillusioned after they lived in Japan for a little bit. So, um, and I obviously I don't like to. Well, it's not pleasant to be around that kind of people, those kinds of individuals. Okay. Are you going to do more videos with Cause? I really enjoy collabs between YouTubers who talk about languages. I probably will do another video with Cause. He's a really nice guy. He's helped me a lot with my phonetics lessons because he provides a lot of the recordings, and he's also very smart, and his English also is basically impeccable. So especially for a Japanese person. So yeah, I would like to do more videos with him, although it'll definitely be a considerable amount of time before we can do that, because I've got like so much work piled up in terms of like my videos, my phonetics videos, my comedic videos, and then like some of the side projects I have going on right now as well. So, okay. わかりました。ありがとう。どういたしまして。Okay, Dogan Lake, congrats as well for the new home. Bought an apartment 7 years ago, rare for a military member. And remembered how scary the whole process was. Owning has been a relief, though. Yeah, so we're still kind of coming off of that nervousness of buying. Like, do we actually own this place? Like, what do we do if there's a problem and stuff like that? But I think once we're finished settling in, everything will be even nicer. Okay, got to go in a minute, but I want to say thanks for doing this. It's been fascinating, and thanks for your comedy and phonetics videos. They've been a real inspiration to help me step up my studies. Awesome. I'm very, very happy to hear that, and good luck with your studies. Thank you very much for the support, and if you ever have any questions, just send me a message. Okay. What kind of animals do you get around Beppu? Do you get raccoon dogs there? No, we don't get the raccoon dogs, but we get, there's a lot of monkeys, actually, and I think that there's a fair amount of, what do you call them? Not the warthogs. なんて言うんだっけ、あれ。One second. Wild boars. I understand that there's some wild boars around here, but I've never seen one. So mostly monkeys. Okay. I think one of my epiphanies that I had after a while is that social language are one and the same. It's so important to understand the culture to speak naturally. Haha. Yeah, I agree with that. I think kind of briefly touching on what I was alluding to earlier is that a lot of not a lot, some foreigners who end up getting disillusioned with Japan, I think what perhaps happens to them is that they become completely fluent in Japanese. So there's kind of nothing left to study. There's always more to study, but after they've attained Japanese fluency, they kind of start to realize that their cultural and personal values don't align with that of the typical Japanese person. And so for them, perhaps with fluency comes a lot of obstacles in terms of living in Japan. So yeah, definitely if you not only try to learn the language, but also to fit in Japanese society and adopt some Japanese customs, I think that you'll have a more pleasant time living in Japan. Do you have the monkey firecrackers? I don't know what that is. Maybe. I was working on a rice farm, and they have the perimeter surrounded by these firecracker things that went off when monkeys came to. No, I've never seen one of those. I'm not sure what that is. Got to go. Great live stream. Hope the Patreon continues to go well. Hope we can do an interview or short discussion video someday later. All right, thanks, Nuke. Good. Thanks for all the questions. I appreciate it, and look forward to speaking with you again soon. So I'm all caught up with the questions. So I'll probably have about 10 or 15 more minutes. Then I think my kids are probably going to wake up from their naps. So I guess I'll just kind of wait around and see if anyone has any questions. Looks like there's 32 people here right now. So I assume someone's going to ask another question. If they don't, I'm not sure what the best, there's a whole variety of topics that I could talk about, but I'm sure as soon as I start talking about one of those, someone will pop in with a question. So I'm a little bit hesitant to do that. Okay, here we go. Okay, so what about advanced Japanese lesson number 4? Useful words in Tokyo sounded like a lot of drinking with colleagues. Fiction. Yeah, so I actually never drank during my study abroad year in Tokyo. So yeah, that was completely fiction. I never drank the entire time that I lived in Tokyo, but I lived with a lot of people, like in my Japanese dormitory, that did drink. So I knew some of the more, what do you say? I knew enough details about like the places they would go to drink and like the nightclubs and stuff like that to be able to write about it coherently without it seeming obviously like I didn't know what I was talking about. Hopefully. Yeah, so I have a bunch, but I don't want to monopolize. Okay, what's your favorite place in Japan outside of Kyushu? So hands down, Minato Mirai in Yokohama. That place I absolutely love. It's so gorgeous, it's so picturesque. I always tell this story. I snowboard. TJ, I snowboard. But I always imagined a very futuristic Japan before coming here. But I think you come to Tokyo, and most of Tokyo looks like it was built like 30 years ago. So it actually doesn't look futuristic. It looks old. So Minato Mirai in Yokohama, I think, is one of the few places in Japan that actually looks like the entire city basically looks very futuristic. Maybe that and like Odaiba and like certain parts of like Roppongi, stuff like that. Like I actually think that even like Shibuya looks quite old besides maybe that one crosswalk. So I was very kind of, I had, what do you call it? Cognitive dissonance. Is that the right term? Because I was expecting futuristic Japan and everything super clean and all like with one single design, so to speak. I don't know what I was imagining really, but I found that when I went to Yokohama, but I have never seen that anywhere else outside of Yokohama. Or well, Minato Mirai specifically. Yeah, I really like snowboarding. I haven't been in a long time, let's say almost 9 years now, but I was really into it for a very long time. Yeah, the waterfront there and the technology and the general architecture there, it's like you can see by looking at the city that someone, not the city, but that particular part of the city, that particular area, someone had like a master plan for like those, I don't know how big that area is, that, 50, 60 square blocks. It's like the whole thing is super organized. And it's all coherent. It's all like, it all has the same design, and it's just beautiful. I love that area. I used to go there as often as I could when I was studying abroad. So while all of my friends were drinking in Tokyo, I would go to Yokohama Minato Mirai alone and just walk around listening to music. So. However, I do like how old and new places mix together in Tokyo and other places. Yeah, I've never snowboarded. Actually, no, I have snowboarded in Japan. It wasn't that long ago. I think it was 6 or 7 years ago, actually. And it was in Akita. So I snowboarded once there, and it was quite nice. To anyone who wants to visit Japan, Hokkaido is amazing for its nature. I also love Kanazawa for, なんだろうこれ。兼六 Glen. I don't know how to read this. The Gold District and then the Geisha District, etc. I've never been to Hokkaido, but I really want to go. It's one of the few, it's like the #1 place on my to visit list right now. I guess Kenroku. Oh, okay, interesting. I guess with how my high school works, I have hours to study Japanese and phonetics, which is nice. Yeah, that's good. If you can, like when I was studying Japanese, I talked about this earlier, but like at university in Keio, I was studying holistic Japanese in the classroom. And then outside of the classroom, I was like spending the majority of my real efforts, my concentration was really into phonetics. So kind of basics, as little effort as possible went into like getting a good grade, good marks on normal Japanese in the classroom. And then I would all in on the phonetics side when I had time outside of the classroom. So only went to Sapporo for the snow festival and Otaru. Yeah, I really want to go to Hokkaido. Hey, Dogen, glad I could catch the end of this. Thanks for the help in Japanese studies so far. No problem, Levy. Thank you very much for joining. Let me know if you ever have any questions. Japanese Style Originator is a great Netflix show for all things traditional Japanese. Huh, I'll probably have to look into that. Okay, do you notice anything about the work culture in Japan? I've heard it's starting to get away from the seniority culture and that there's a lot of clashing between old and new generations. Yes, this is definitely happening right now because there's a lot of push in Japan from right now from like the politicians and the upper education institutions to get more globalized. But everyone who understands a global mentality and global values, so to speak, and can speak English, it's the younger generation. People that have studied abroad, or maybe they were born in the States and lived there for 5 or 10 years, and then they came to Japan. But the people that are pushing the globalism are actually not those people, it's the older people, the seniority, as you talked about earlier. Yeah. So a lot of times it's the people, the capable people, the younger people that can speak English, that understand the values, they're clashing with the older people, the people that are in charge. And that's because these people, they're pushing the system that they don't really understand, is the way that I perceive things. So there's a lot of, obviously, conflict that comes because of that. Okay, I've subscribed to your pitch accent a few months ago, but I haven't been able to keep a good pace and don't know how to conciliate pitch accent studies with my Japanese classes, part 1. What do you watch on Netflix? Do you read manga? Well, I don't read manga, but on Netflix, I recently watched Mob Psycho 100. I loved that. That was awesome. The assignments for grammar and composition are so time-consuming. Should I ignore my teachers and focus on pitch accent? What do you think about it? Sorry for the long post. Yeah, more gaidaigo. Yeah, too much gaidaigo. Yes, so I recommend, I kind of just talked about this, but I do recommend not listening too much to what your teachers say when it comes to like pitch accent and pronunciation, because I think most of them only understand those topics on a subconscious, unconscious level. So I think the most effective thing to do for your speaking is to do an all Japanese all the time approach, where you buy a Japanese movie and put it on repeat all the time, and then supplement that with my phonetics courses. So I would watch like one phonetics video, like maybe one every 3 days or so, but then watch that same video once or twice a day, such that you know all of the important information for sure. And then what'll happen is you'll begin to pick up those study points in the phonetic lessons in the Japanese media that you're consuming. And then once you're consciously listening, once your phonetic awareness gets to the point where you can hear those things, you can kind of start do more passive listening that will still be very, very effective. So I hope that answers your question. Probably got to go in about 5 minutes or so. So let's see. Yep, no problems. So let's see. Well, if we're talking a bit about anime, I'll recommend Violet Evergarden from Kyoto Animation, which is on Netflix. Haven't heard of it, but I'll take your word for it. I unfortunately don't have very much time to watch Netflix right now. Like the only time that I can watch Netflix is when I'm preparing wet wipes for when I wipe my daughter's poops. It's like I take like 20 of those things out at a time and fold them so that they're easy to use. So that's the only time I can watch Netflix. What is your go-to response to Nihongo okay? And does it ever become less patronizing to deal with that? Yeah, I think that you have to realize that no one ever tries to say it in a patronizing manner. It's just that once you hear it 1,000 times, you kind of, obviously it kind of gets annoying for the listener side, but no one's ever asking you that question just specifically to get on your nerves. So when people ask me if I can speak Japanese, I usually just say, "Hai, dekimasu," or "Hai, daijoubu desu." Yeah, like what TJ said. Or like, "Hai, mondai nai desu." Okay, so got delayed. I had a follow-up. Which material should I apply my phonetic practice to? Perhaps a few simple passages or just vocab I know. A bit confused about applying it given my broken understanding. So what I would encourage you to do, it depends on your Japanese level to a large extent, but I encourage everyone to speak Japanese as much as possible and to record yourself. So what I would do, Pajama Man, is start a YouTube channel. You don't have to make the videos public, but I would encourage you to, because I think if they're public, you'll be that much more motivated to sound good and take your studies seriously. And then to make like a 5-minute vlog each day in Japanese, not because vlogging is cool, but because if it's a vlog, you can just talk about what you did that day in Japanese, even if it's very basic Japanese, or even if you're just like saying like a word list or something like that. The important thing is just to speak every day, and then to do that in a way such that you can go back and listen to those recordings and apply the pitch accent knowledge. So thank you so much for doing this. As someone whose end goal is to live in Japan personally, it is inspiring to see someone who's made it. Congratulations on the house. Super happy for you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's weird for me too to finally reach this milestone, but thank you for the kind words and for all the comments. I appreciate it, Val. Okay, and it sounds like my kids are starting to wake up, so I've got to get going, but thank you everyone who joined the live stream. It was an hour and a half. I'll be putting this link up on Patreon later tonight probably, because I don't think I'll have enough time to post the link in because I got to go like right now, but thank you again to everyone, and I'll probably put it up on YouTube as well in maybe like a month or two, maybe when I need to put out a video, but it'll still be exclusive to Patreon for a very long time. So thank you again to everyone who joined. I'm repeating myself, but yeah, thank you, Roy, Valen, Carranza, Pajama Man, TJ, Levy, Valen, Jeremy, and yeah, I'll try and do this again soon if possible. So thanks again, and talk to you soon. Thanks for all the support on Patreon as well. All right, talk to you guys soon. Bye.